Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Jeremy Shermack, and I want to welcome you to Journalism 205 Multimedia Journalism here at Cuesta College. I'm very excited to get started with the semester. I'm excited to have you here in class. And what we're going to do here in this first video lecture is go over some of the basic course concepts, get you familiar with things that you need to know, and then hopefully have you get enough information where you can ask some follow-up questions via email or on the discussion boards, and we'll go from there. All right, so I have some slides. Let's take a look at those. Give me just one moment to pull those up. Okay, so this is multimedia journalism. Again, Journalism 205. Welcome, I'm Dr. Shermack. I want to talk today. What's on our agenda is just an overall welcome message and what you can expect from this class. We're going to talk a little bit about how the class will work. And then we're going to start right from the very ground level, discussing what is journalism. And you'll have that discussion carry over into your readings and the discussion board this week as well. So let's do a welcome to class. The first thing I want to do is introduce myself. As I said, I think 3 times now, I'm Dr. Shermack, and I'm very excited to be here at Cuesta. I've been teaching at the collegiate level for over 20 years now, so it's been quite a while. I started as a journalist myself. I worked at a very small newspaper quite a long time ago called the Harbor Country News, and my work in journalism began really before the internet, which makes me sound like a dinosaur. I realized that, but I bring that up for a very important reason. Journalism was done very differently back in those days, and I am not a back in those days sort of guy. I believe in using all the latest technology, all the latest innovations, the latest discoveries to make journalism even better than it's ever been before, and that's what we're going to do in this class. But a lot of what I learned at my first couple jobs in journalism and also in journalism school are basic foundations of journalism that really are the same and haven't changed that much because of the technology that's there. The technology hasn't really affected those basic tenets of journalism. Things like fairness and balance and good reporting all have a lot of value still, and you can make an argument they're more valuable than ever before. So those early experiences for me in journalism really shaped who I am and shaped who I am as an instructor. As the days went on, I got another job at the South Bend Tribune in South Bend, Indiana. If you're not familiar with that, that's where the University of Notre Dame is. I'm not a Notre Dame fan, but that's okay. Just giving you some context. I continued my schooling. I did a master's degree at DePaul University in Chicago, and I lived in Chicago for 15 years. That's where I came from before I came to Cuesta. I studied journalism at the University of Missouri, which has a very unique distinction as the world's first journalism school. And we as Mizzou alums are very proud of that. And then I went on and did my PhD at the University of Texas at Austin. And there at UT Austin, I taught, and I also studied journalism. And I studied particularly how journalists use social media. And that's a lot of what we're going to do in this class. So I have the practical experience, I have the research experience, and I have the teaching experience. And more than anything, I'm really happy to be here. I love teaching. I love working with students. If you ever want to come see me, do not hesitate to come by my office or shoot me an email. We can meet up on Zoom, whatever the case may be. But I'd love to chat with you, even if you really don't have any questions. Just come on and say hi. I will say I always have candy. So bear in mind, there's always some sweets that you can find in my office. A couple other things about me on my little, I don't know, vision board that I have here. I love music. I play the ukulele and the guitar. I'm not very good, but I enjoy playing it. I'm originally from Michigan. It's a lot colder there than it is here. I like this weather a lot better. I'm a diehard baseball fan, particularly a diehard Cubs fan. And I really enjoyed watching them win in 2016. I've been to almost all the ballparks in the major leagues. I'm still on a quest to knock out a few more. And I also love to cook. So that's a little bit about me. As we move through the semester, I hope I learn more about you. Our first discussion board asks a question, why are you here? And through that question, I'm going to hopefully learn a little bit more about you, what's motivating you, your experience with these skills, so on and so forth. So I look forward to getting to know you. Thank you for listening to get to know me. Let's talk about the class. I'm going to get real simple here and boil it down to the course objectives. All right. So these objectives are set forth by the college and really by the state board. So this class can be transferable. And I mentioned that because it's really important, right? We want to be consistent, and they want people to have an understanding of the kind of skills that you've gained by taking this type of course. So number one, you're going to demonstrate the ability to produce multimedia stories for online news sites. All right. What do we mean by multimedia stories? For this class, we define those as, in this order, the order that we're going to look at them, as photos. So like a photo slideshow. All right. That's a good example of a multimedia story, multimedia journalism story. Video. So even like a TikTok will count as a video multimedia story, or something you might see on Instagram. Audio, right? Audio as well. And don't think you're going to get away without doing any writing. Any element of journalism requires writing, and we'll talk a little bit about writing for multimedia journalism in this class. When we talk about online news sites, we're not just talking about websites. In fact, this class, we're going to very, very heavily focus on making content for social media sites. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that is later. But it's really important that you understand how to do that, because that's how journalists are reaching their audiences today. Another objective here, describe the characteristics that make multimedia storytelling distinct from traditional journalism. The first 2 weeks of this class, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about traditional journalism today. It'll be in your reading for week 1. And then as we move forward, we'll talk more about what multimedia storytelling is, particularly in week 2, and then look at examples and actually do that work going forward the rest of the semester. Describe the characteristics of entrepreneurial journalism. That's kind of hard to say sometimes. It's sort of like Worcestershire sauce. Entrepreneurial journalism is thinking about sort of creating your own business that is journalism, maybe creating your own website, your own blog. We're going to look at that later in the semester, but it certainly is an element of this new wave of storytelling in journalism. And lastly, but not leastly, critically evaluate professional journalism multimedia packages. That is looking at examples of work, analyzing that work, looking at each other's work is very important. I have at least 3, possibly 4 examples, it is 4 actually, that I posted to the week 1 module for you to take a look at. And just watch them and get a sense of what the stories are sharing, what the stories are doing, how they're structured, how they use information to be shared in a way that is utilizing multimedia. So just look at those as some examples of what we're going to actually create in this class. That is your future. All right, that's very exciting. So that's a little bit of about the course through the lens of our course objectives. How are you going to be assessed? What are you actually going to do in this class? Well, 40% of your grade is a culminating final project that you're going to do. You'll have time to work on that during the last 2 weeks of the semester. So that's 40% of your grade, and we'll get into that much later. But just to give you a little sense, it brings together all the skills that you've used, that you've developed over the course of the class. And what's even better is that if those projects are successful, meaning they score an 85% or higher, and I have your permission, we're going to publish those on the Questonian website and or social media avenues. So you'll be able to get a clip for your portfolio, which will be wonderful. That's kind of the end goal. Assignments, 20% of your grade. Those are weekly, sometimes bi-weekly assignments where you're practicing a particular skill that we've just learned. Maybe it's creating audio. Maybe it's taking some photos. Maybe it's doing a video. You're practicing what we're learning. So those are important assignments to build your skill set as we work towards that final project. Quizzes, 20%. Quizzes are designed to check your knowledge, make sure you're following through on your work, make sure you're doing the readings that are assigned. Quizzes also contain some information, or some questions, I should say, about current events. So it's also making sure that you're keeping up with the news. And it's not going to be deep dive, detailed stuff, what color tie was the president wearing, or what color, shirt was the president wearing, or something like that. It's going to be something of substance, something meaningful. I'm never one to write gotcha quiz questions. I just want to see that you're paying attention somewhat to the news. Scroll through a news app, look on Google News. You're going to be fine if you do that. You'll have enough knowledge there. But those are your quizzes, and we'll have one of those about every week. There are some weeks when I don't have a quiz, but most weeks we will. And then discussion boards. And discussion boards are really important because this is where we interact. As an asynchronous class, we're not in the classroom together. So we need to have some kind of interaction, and this is very important. So discussion boards are a portion of your coursework as well. So if my math is mathing right, that adds up to 100%. Final project, assignment, quizzes, and discussion boards. And of course, if you have any questions about these, please see the syllabus. You can get a lot more detail on these in the syllabus, by the way, or of course, reach out to me and let me know. Required tools and materials. This is really important, all right? Because we're making things. I use the word things broadly a lot, but we're doing a thing, we're making things. You need some tools to do that. Number one is a computer. If you're watching this, you're probably watching me on your computer. So hopefully that's checked off your list already. I have designed this class so if the only tool you have is your mobile phone, your smartphone, I feel old saying smartphone. If the only tool you have is your smartphone, that is enough to get everything done. I'm going to say that again. If the only tool you have is a smartphone, that is enough to get everything done. There are apps. These phones today have cameras that are far better than any camera I ever used when I was working as a photojournalist. You have all the tools you need. So I don't want you to come into this class thinking you need to go out and buy a DSLR camera. If you have one and you want to use it and you feel comfortable with it, knock yourself out. But I'm trying to get you used to the fact and normalize the fact that we can do a lot of really great journalism, and professionals are doing a lot of really great journalism using only their mobile phones. So you can do everything in here with your mobile phone. One caveat to that, though, I do want to ask you to purchase some kind of tripod and stabilizer that will help steady your camera. All right, you're going to need this because sometimes you'll be doing what's called a stand-up, and that's where you're actually on camera talking to the camera. And you might not have a buddy there to hold the camera. And even if you have a buddy to hold the camera, they're not going to be able to hold it as steady as a stabilizer and a tripod. So in the syllabus and also on our Canvas page, there are some links to examples of these devices, these stabilizers and tripods. You can get them for anywhere between, the stabilizer anywhere between $5 and $25. The tripod, you can get one anywhere between $10 and $30. They're fairly reasonably priced, but you definitely want to have one. I will be able to tell very easily when you're shooting without a tripod. All right. And more importantly, your audience will be able to tell when you're shooting without a tripod and a stabilizer. So make sure to look on our required tools and materials page on Canvas and also in our syllabus for those links to see what that is. Other items you will need: an Instagram account, all right, because you are going to post assignments on Instagram. Yes, your work is going to go to the public. You're also going to post assignments to YouTube. So our video and our audio work is going to go on YouTube, and that is actually how you turn them in. So these are not options, these are requirements, okay? And we'll talk more about how we do that once we get to those assignments. Last but certainly not least, the other element that you need, or the other tool you need, I guess this is a material, is our textbook. And our textbook is called Mobile and Social Journalism, A Practical Guide for Multimedia Journalism, and it's written by Anthony Adornato. I got it right. Adornato. All right. I've heard Anthony speak at conferences. He does a wonderful job. He's written one of the only textbooks that really is fitting for this class. I think this is an excellent book that's really going to teach you a lot and gives you a lot of practical examples of multimedia journalism. You can purchase the paperback book. You can purchase the ebook. You can purchase a used book. I don't care where you purchase it. You can purchase it at the good old Cuesta College bookstore. You can find it on that website that starts with A and ends with Mazan. Anywhere you please, all right? The ISBN numbers are written in the syllabus and on that required materials page on Canvas. So make sure you're getting the right book. But you will need this, and you'll need it rather quickly because we have a reading from week 1, and we'll have a reading from this book just about every week. I think it's that good of a book, and it's a required text for our class. Okay. I don't want to say requirements, but you're going to need some software to do this work, right? That's pretty obvious. Every one of you as Cuesta students can access the Adobe suite of products. So when I say Adobe, if you're not familiar, you might be more familiar when I say Photoshop or Illustrator or Audition, right? Premiere. Those are all Adobe products, and it's beautiful because as a student, you get this included with your tuition. There's a form that you need to submit. There's a link to that form on our Canvas page to get access to it. Adobe is the industry standard. If you were to move forward into a 4-year degree program, into a full-on career producing multimedia work, you would need to know Adobe. That said, I am not requiring you to learn Adobe in this class. Sounds kind of strange, right? Well, one of the reasons why I'm not requiring you is because there are so many different tools to use that work really, really well, that are mobile apps, that are free software. You can get a lot done with very little as far as software power and, more importantly, software cost. So I don't want to restrict you and say you have to use Adobe. I encourage it. You have access to it, but you can use other programs for photo, video, audio editing, video and audio recording. There might be some out there that you're already comfortable with. So if you're already comfortable with some of them, use them, all right? I have a list on Canvas of alternatives to Adobe. You can take a look at those and use those if you want. If you have some software that you're wondering, would it work for the class? Maybe, maybe not. Please ask me. There's a good chance if you're already familiar with it and you like it, I'm going to say yes, all right? I'm more interested in the final products you're producing than what software you're using to make them, if that makes sense. You can even use programs like iMovie and GarageBand if you have an iPhone, okay? So I just want to emphasize that. I'll often give you tutorials that talk about how to do things in Adobe, but there's so many software options out there. I don't want to limit you in any way whatsoever. Let me know if you have questions on that. So as I hope you know by now, Multimedia Journalism J205, Journalism 205 is a asynchronous course. Asynchronous, that is a fancy way of saying we don't meet live, all right? There are no live meetings. You come into the course on Canvas and you consume course material. And I'll do these video lectures. I won't do them every single week because you don't need to see my mug that often. But on certain weeks where I think it's appropriate and necessary, I'll do that. Maybe every once in a while, I'll throw out a live class opportunity where if you want to jump on and ask some questions, you can. But this is an asynchronous course. What's so unique about it is it's considered a skills course. You're learning how to do things. You're using tools and software to create this multimedia. So it's a little bit unique that it's an asynchronous course. That means that you are going to need to be very self-motivated, very disciplined, and a word that I learned when I was finishing my PhD that I fell in love with called kludgy. Kludgy, you see it written there, Cludgy. I don't think it's an actual word, but I love this word. Kludgy means you just find a way to get it done. All right. It may not be the prettiest. It may not be the most eloquent. It may not be what the pros do just yet, but you find a way to get it done. And that's what you need to do, not only in this class, but in journalism. All right. It isn't pretty all the time. It isn't as fancy and as advanced as you might think. A lot of journalists use their phones to produce TV packages that you see on TV, right? They're very kludgy with their phones. So you're getting the benefit and the convenience of an asynchronous class, but in return for that, I want to ask you to push yourself a little bit harder, be a little bit more disciplined, self-motivated, and also be kludgy. Make sure you're getting these projects done in any way you can. Quite obviously, I'm not just throwing you out to the sharks. I'll be here to help you. But it does take another level when you're doing an asynchronous class of that self-discipline and driving yourself forward, okay? So let's peel back the curtains a little bit further and just get back to the basics. What is journalism? All right, what is journalism? Journalism has been around for hundreds of years in various ways, shapes, and forms. You know, and the reason why I say that it's been around for hundreds of years is because journalism is all about telling stories. It's about telling stories. It's about sharing stories of the people around you in your community, right? These stories can often be happy, wonderful stories. These stories can also be tragic and sad, but they teach the world something. They teach the world something about empathy and compassion. They help us understand our world. They help us understand how policies put in place by those in power are affecting everyone. So these stories have tremendous power. And we're also doing journalism in a way that is fair and balanced and accurate, right? Free of bias. And it's hard to do that. We're biased as humans. Everyone is. I am, you are. All right. We just have inherent bias within us, but we can operate as professionals in journalism and try to pull as much bias as we can from our practices and our procedures. And that's journalism. So, you know, this journalism that we're doing in multimedia journalism, we're still using the same core concepts that are at the heart of journalism, no matter what we do, whether we're writing or shooting a video or making a TikTok or taking a photo. All of those core elements of journalism are still there. Chapter 1 is going to cover a lot of those, talk about traditional journalism, and then talk about this new wave of journalism, sometimes called multimedia journalism, sometimes called digital journalism, and the differences between those two. So make sure you're reading chapter 1. It's a critical chapter. One thing you want to think about, and I think you should think about this anytime you consume a news story, especially when you write or put together a news story, why is it news? Why is it news? In the Journalism 201 class, we cover news values very in depth. And if you're interested in journalism, I would highly recommend that class as well. What is news? And when we answer that question, what is news? Usually what we're looking at are news values. So one news value is timeliness. How recent is the event? News is new. We write about recent events. So the newer something is, the more news value that it has. Conflict. Is there disagreement? Right? Is there disagreement? And conflict doesn't have to be just disagreement. I think we hear disagreement, we think immediately about politics, right? And then that's news, of course, but conflict can also be where any two forces are colliding. Think about weather. All right. I love weather. I love to study weather. I'm kind of a weather nerd. We don't write a story about a sunny day, right? We don't write a story, the major headline, not a cloud in the sky. There's no conflict there. Nothing is out of the ordinary. Forces are not colliding. But if there is maybe a tropical storm or some sort of severe rain event, I'm trying to think of California weather for you. we write about those because that's unique. That's conflict. That's nature versus man. There's flooding. People are stuck in their cars. People's homes are being flooded. That's conflict. So it's not just a personal disagreement. It's also nature, right? Or a car accident, car versus car. That's conflict. So that's an element that raises the value of news. Another element is novelty. Is it unique? Is it something different? Is it something that doesn't happen every day? All right. We can look at weather that way too. When it rains in California, that's kind of a big news story, and people make fun of it. I get it. I'm from the Midwest, so of course I make fun of it. Like, you're crazy. It's raining. Rain is pretty normal. Not here, right? And rain can cause serious issues. So it's a unique event. Another big news value is impact. How much does the story affect the audience? How much does the story affect the audience? And this is where it's so important to think about your audience. What matters to your audience? For the purposes of this class, I really want you to think about your audience as you, the Cuesta student, because that's how we think about our audience with the Cuestonian, the student newspaper. We think about our audience as Cuesta College and the surrounding community. Okay, and that can mean a lot of different things, right? And we're kind of out here on this little island between Morro Bay and Slow, but we have our community. How much does this story affect the audience? That's going to help you determine whether or not to first do the story, but also what to emphasize in the story. Prominence. Does the story involve someone of note? Celebrity news. Some people roll their eyes at it. I get it. But prominence is why we have celebrity news. Prominence is why if there's a state dinner at the White House and a dignitary from across the ocean comes and visits the president, that's news. No one writes a news story when I go out to dinner. I'm not the president, right? So prominence really matters. And then proximity, and this is defining where your audience is. So we said a moment ago, Cuesta, our audience is Cuesta College. Our area is the Cuesta College area, the surrounding areas, into Slow, into Morro Bay, maybe places beyond. When you have all these elements in play, and not every news story will have these elements in play, but when you have these elements in play and they're at play at a very high level, that's all the more reason the story is that much more important. All right. So not every story is going to have one of these, but if a story has all of them, you know that's a big story, right? You know that's a really big story. So I just wanted to insert this in our conversation for week one because it's a really important element of basic ground level journalism that we cannot forget. Because you might come up with a story idea maybe for your final project, and I'm not this mean, but I might say in a really nice way, who cares? And what I'm talking about are news values. I'm going to ask you, how is this news? Tell me why this is news. And I want you to talk journalism to me. I want you to use this terminology, okay? I mentioned that journalism is storytelling, and it's been that way for hundreds of years. And journalism has been an effective tool. You're going to hear a lot of criticism of journalism. I hear it all the time. People ask me, what do you do? I say, I'm a journalism professor. Oh my gosh, journalism, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They've been calling for the death of journalism for over 100 years now, by the way, but we're still going, and we're going rather strongly because we've adapted, right? There is a lot of power in multimedia. Check out this data. 62% of American adults get their news on social media. And some might think that's even higher. But this is from a survey done by one of my alma maters, Indiana University, where I studied journalism first. 62% of American adults get their news on social media. We need to be there as journalists. We need to take the news to them. They're seeking that information on those platforms. That's why we're focusing on making content that fits those platforms well. And we're actually putting it on those platforms, which is why I'm having you get an Instagram account, a YouTube account. Speaking of, 1/3 of Instagram users say they use the site for news content. This has changed. And you might think 1/3, that's not much. That's a lot of people. That's millions upon millions of people. And I will tell you, for a while, Instagram was my happy place. I didn't want news on Instagram, but now it's my #1 social media. Feel free to follow me. It's a bunch of silly nonsense, but you're welcome to follow me at Jeremy Shermack. But I go there now for everything, including my news. And so we need to create content, and traditional news outlets are figuring this out. They need to create content in order to get their news in front of the audience. It's vital. Last data set, or last piece of data here, 29% of podcast listeners say they listen to keep up with current events. Again, 29% doesn't sound like a lot. That's millions upon millions of people, because podcasts are hot. And we're going to talk about podcasts. Some of the best journalism being done in this country right now is being done for podcasts. If you're a true crime fan out there, oh boy, you're listening to journalism. You're listening to good journalism. And sometimes the way they go about getting these true crime podcasts going is a little suspect, but it still, to me, is driving good journalism. So we're going to talk about audio. You're going to do a project with audio, and we're going to learn how to make it, what it is, why it's effective, so on and so forth. So that's some data I wanted to share with you about the power of multimedia. You'll see more in the readings and the examples this week. But as we take a look ahead to our week, first thing I want you to do, take a look at the course syllabus. The course syllabus is a guide and sort of a contract, if you will, for the way things operate in our class. It's an agreement between me and you, all right? And it's a way that things are done. And if you have a question on anything in that syllabus, please let me know. I'm happy to explain further or answer questions. It also has a calendar all the way throughout the semester of what our assignments will be, those due dates, so on and so forth, always subject to change. But I like to try to stay on schedule as much as possible. Take a look at the page. I'm sorry, I skipped one. Make sure you're reading the Adornato book, chapter 1. It's called Forces at the Gate, an Active Audience. Does a great job comparing journalism, traditional journalism, multimedia, this new journalism that we're looking at in the class. Take a look at the page on Canvas about required class materials and get those materials this week, including the textbook, okay? Take a look at the apps and software alternatives to Adobe. We'll look at those more down the road, but just kind of get familiar with it now. If you want to use Adobe products, I would send in that sign up form so you can get that ready to go. Beyond reading and watching, you have a discussion board answering the question, why are you here? On this discussion board, it's a bit unique because you don't need to do a response post. You're just doing one post. There's a couple questions for you to answer. I'll be responding to all of those throughout the week. And then lastly, your first quiz of the semester, quiz 1, and that's going to cover this lecture, the materials, the reading that you did, and yes, current events, okay? So that's it for today's video lecture. I just want to say thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for engaging. If you have any questions at any time ever, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and let me know. But I'm really happy to have you here in class. I'm going to stop my share. I'm really looking forward to a great semester and getting to know all of you and creating some amazing, amazing multimedia journalism. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.